she's here. Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel, my booktube channel, Loc'D Booktician, and today we're just gonna talk about the thumbnail. You've guessed it, I know. It's my birthday. I guess I don't know what to say. I don't really celebrate my birthday because I just want it to be like a low-key day. I feel like mainly throughout the rest of the year, things is like pretty all over the place and life be lifing, if you know what I mean. And I just be wanting like zero, just chill on my birthday or my birthday weekend or both. It just really depends. Here we are with that. So in regards to this video, all of the people you saw on the thumbnail, we're talking about Sally Ride, we're talking about Miles Davis, and we're talking about Lauryn Hill. All of them share the same birthday as me. Another person I think I want to mention is Lenny Kravitz, and I really wanted to read his memoir by the time I was filming this video, but unfortunately, again, life is what? Lifing, and I don't have time to read his book as well, but I do plan on reading it this year because I want to read about his life too. I think he's a very interesting musician, so I want to read his memoir as well. So I asked my patrons to help me with this video because I wanted to guide it according to questions or, you know, things we have common, things we have differently, you know, just different ways. And I hope to timestamp all the different subjects I'm talking about, that if you're looking for something particular or something specific, I think is a better word, you can go ahead to the timestamps below and just go directly to what you're looking for in regards to myself and the celebrities that I share birthdays with. So first we're going to start off with Lauryn Noel Hill. She has the same birthday as I. She was born in 1975 though. I was not. She's mainly popular for being a rapper. She has won over 8 Grammys, and to this day she is the only woman to have received over 8 Grammys in her career. The only rapper, I should say. Let me see. If you saw Sister Act 2, she's in that. I really loved her scenes in that movie, specifically her in the classroom. Also, Lauryn Hill has a very unique voice to me. It kind of reminds me of like Rihanna. I feel that if it wasn't for people like Lauryn Hill, there wouldn't be a Rihanna, because there's very like those raspy, unique voices that I love to hear, and Lauryn Hill and Rihanna both have that. I started reading the book The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, She Begat This, which is looking at Lauryn Hill's musical career. So one of the questions that my patron asked is for me to talk about like differences and similarities between myself and each of these celebrities. With Lauryn Hill and myself, let's start with the similarities. We both are Black women. We both have the same birthday. I guess that's a given. Clearly, Lauryn Hill is out here doing the Lord's work and opening so many doors for Black women artists to come through. One of the things I agreed with Lauryn Hill was how she blended her musical talents with Y-Class. I thought that was like really dope. I've always been a fan of how she blended her sound and her artiste with the Fugees. Another thing is she thought that her music would heal hip-hop, and in a lot of ways it did, and I wish that I was more cognizant at the time when she was most popular to be like, yeah, I remember how that felt, but I can't say that I did. But you know, I've also always listened to Lauryn Hill, and I remember listening to Lauryn Hill when I was younger, and I always felt like she was one of those hip-hop artists or rappers or singers that I felt was very different than other artists that I was seeing at the time, even when it came to her style, how she spoke, and then pretty much just aura she had about herself that I just truly appreciated and wanted to aspire to. And especially since she had locks, I was like, oh my god, like her and India.Arie were 2 Black women that I grew up thinking like, wow, their locks are so beautiful. Even though Lauryn Hill locks were fake, you know, we won't come for her, but still the fact that she was like, I'm still wearing these locks, sis, I commend you. Another thing that me and Lauryn Hill have in common is being late. I'm not gonna say I'd be as late as Lauryn Hill. There are times that I've been late to things and I felt really bad about it, but life was life, and there was no way to avoid being late. And I was like, I'm here for that. And even though there were some things I'm like, dang, Lauryn, did you have to be that late? But still, I've been there too. So it's like, who am I to out here come for her life? You know what I mean? It's really the pot out here calling the kettle black, and I won't don't engage. Another thing I really agreed with what Lauryn Hill did, she really rewrote what beauty standards were for Black women, and I think at a time where it was most needed. Even though beauty standards for Black women are constantly changing, I do feel like her being like, listen, you can be just as beautiful, being natural, was just invaluable to the Black community at large. I know for me personally, it was really important for me to see other Black women with locks. I've always wanted locks secretly, never told my family, but I've always wanted locks secretly. And I wanted it because I thought it looked really beautiful, and I found that it would be a very low maintenance hairstyle. And I was just really tired of always having people in my hair, and I was really tired of, you know, upkeeping the maintenance of doing my hair and paying other folks to do my hair. I'm really frugal at heart, so if I gotta spend a bunch of money, I'd rather head out. I'd just rather not engage. For me, it was really important that, you know, I found something that fit me. And in 2016, I decided to lock my hair. The best decision I've ever done. Even though I've had some issues with my hair along the way, still the best decision I ever done. And having locks wouldn't have happened if there wasn't Lauryn Hills of the world. There wasn't India Aries of the world. And it wouldn't have happened also if I didn't meet a group of Black women I'm still tight with today. And most of those Black women, no, all of those Black women when I met them in graduate school were natural hair Black women. And at the time I was natural too, but I was a loose natural. I want to say maybe 5 of them in the group had locks, and they had long pretty locks. And I said, you know, it's my time. This is a sign. Everything's lining up. Let me go ahead and get these locks. And since then, one of us is now rocking the bald but cute, but still getting these locks have been one of the best things that has ever happened to my hair and to my life. So I thank you. So let's talk about, you know, things I disagreed with Lauryn Hill or with the book. She also was criticized for her style of music. When she was with the Fugees, she incorporated this like Afrocentric style into her music. And then once she left the Fugees or started doing other work, it started to seem as if she was taking from different African nations and using their styles into her own. And then it brings up this question of, can Black Americans acculturate other African nations' culture? I personally feel, and this is just my thought, Black Americans have a unique journey. It's not unique to them, but they have a unique journey as it pertains to coming to America. And I'm saying coming to America, but you know I mean robbed, kidnapped, stolen, those type of things. And with that, a lot of records that would have allowed Black Americans to know who they are today, and when I say know who they are, like their history, their ancestors, are nowhere to be found. And if they are to be found, they are not enough records to represent all the Black Americans who are living here in the United States. And a lot of time, our history has been broken and stolen and broken apart and just really messed up. I wanted to say a curse word, but I won't. Really messed up, and it made it hard for us. And when I say us, I'm us as Black Americans, not in a monolithic way, but I'm using us on purpose. It makes it hard for us to get access to different documentations or get access to different cultures that our ancestors once had. Even though I do believe that you should be careful and you should be mindful of a culture that you are borrowing from, I find that concept to be a bit difficult when it is from a Black American lens. In a lot of ways, a lot of Black Americans are trying to reconnect. They're trying to restart up history. They're trying to find their roots in whatever makes sense to them. And to have the door shut or close and to be told that they cannot celebrate or engage in other African cultural practices can be really difficult to, you know, grasp. And not saying that those other cultures don't have the right to gatekeep. African nations, African communities, Black communities should gatekeep. But I just want to be mindful that there is a history with Black Americans that we don't have access to. Being more open to those who want to be a part of culture X or learn about culture X would be really advantageous. And I'm not saying let everybody in the door, but I'm saying you know who is being genuine most times, and you know who's being malicious. And let's kind of like, you know, focus on that. But however you feel, and I'm talking about people who are of the African diaspora, is valid because, you know, you were living in your lived experience. So, you know, however you feel about that whole thing that I just said, you know, you feel how you feel. I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong or that you're right. The author of the book talked about this God complex that Lauryn Hill had and how she would feed into it and how people would put that upon her. For me, I disagreed with putting someone on a pedestal or putting someone there as an idol, because a lot of times idols and people we put on a pedestal are people. Most times they are human beings. And what do we know about human beings? Flawed. That's just what we know. We know that we make mistakes. We know that we're just trying to figure things out. We know that not one human being in the world knows everything. So therefore, putting someone there and saying that they're in relation to God, it is setting them up to fail. It's setting them up to have struggles along the way. And it doesn't matter like what your religious belief is. You can be an atheist. You can be agnostic. You can be, you know, a churchgoer, whatever. If you're putting someone in a field that is above you, that is perfection, and whatever you think perfection is really setting that person up to either let you down. It's putting a lot of pressure on that person. It's affecting that person's mental health, even when they do it to themselves. So that part of the book, I was like, oh no. Another part I disagreed is with Wyclef. The author didn't go into deep history about it, but Wyclef wrote a book, and in this book, he was saying some very unsavory things about Lauryn Hill. And I said, you say that in mixed company? Another part I disagreed with is that how a lot of people just misunderstood her. And when I'm saying I disagree with, I was just like, that's sad. You know, that a lot of people just misunderstood who Lauryn Hill was, and like this pedestal that people put her on to be the savior of hip hop. It's like, how do you put all of that on a black woman? But also, we know how you would put all of that pressure on a black woman. Another part I disagree that other folks did is that they kept putting this God complex on her and making her feel as if she had to do X, Y, and Z for the sake of hip hop, and forgetting that she was a whole mom with 5 kids. And then in the midst of her having little kids, was sent to prison or jail for tax invasion or tax fraud. And just like the author said, that must have really hurt her feelings that she had to go to jail while her babies were little. Like, that must have been really hurtful. And no one's even talking about that or thinking about that when they were, you know, really giving her a lot of criticism for what she did at the time. It's like people just thought, you know, oh, it's Lauryn Hill. Lauryn gotta be Lauryn and give us Lauryn. And it's like, but Lauryn is also a human being. So I just felt like reading this book, a lot of people and a lot of critics who talked about her was not giving her grace, but it makes sense. That is what people do to black women. So I'm not shocked by the treatment that she received from the community and outside the community, but I will say it's disheartening at best. The last thing I will say about Lauryn Hill in this video is that her story reminded me of that song of that girl when she's like, I can't save nobody, I put my cape down, sorry. I can't save nobody, I put my cape down, sorry. I'm protecting my peace. And I'm just like, you can't save nobody, Lauryn. You know, I just feel like a lot of people just put a lot of pressure on her, and I know I've said that before, but it's like, stop expecting black women to be saviors. Stop expecting black women to save you. That is trash on so many levels that I just found myself really infuriated while reading this book of all the different times that people had this expectation of Lauryn Hill. Let that lady live her life, period. So the next person I want to talk about is Sally Ride. So for most of my life, I knew that me and Sally Ride shared the same birthday. Why did I know that? In elementary, I went to a school named by Ronald E. McNair. If you don't know who that is, look it up. Well, Ronald E. McNair was a black astronaut. I can't remember if he was the first. I don't think he was the first, but he was a black astronaut. And I went to a middle school that had, you know, his name. And on the walls, it was showing like other astronauts. And one of them was Sally Ride. And I looked down and it said like her birth, and it said May 26th. And I was like, oh my God, me and the first American astronaut have the same birthday. I was pumped. I always knew that, you know, me and Sally Ride was here until I read her memoir. Let's talk about the things I agreed with the book and agreed with Sally Ride. So first, let's talk about who Sally Ride is, and then I'll get into the agrees and the disagrees. So Sally Ride was born May 26, 1951. So ahead of my time and 7 years after my grandma was born. That's how I like to put things in perspective. Sally Ride grew up in, like, you know, typical suburban type family with her sister and her two parents. Sally Ride was very lucky to have a father who believed in her and her sister unconditionally and believed that they can do whatever they wanted to, and never told them that they couldn't do something because they were a woman or that they were a little girl. And I think that really helped both of them in their careers. Sally Ride has gotten multiple degrees and they're all from Stanford. She has her BA from Stanford, her MA from Stanford, and her PhD from Stanford. While reading this book, I've learned about her whole life, the things that she thought, and her trajectory to becoming the first American astronaut. She was known to be a strong woman who didn't say a lot, but when she said something, everybody looked, everybody paid attention, and it was how she said things that really commanded the room. One of the things that I agree with the author is that Sally Ride is a role model. I share that similarity as well. Whether I want to admit it or not, I'm a role model, and that's just what it is. I have become a role model for other women either younger than me or around my age, and that's been something that's been really hard for me to grasp, that people look up to me. And I think I first realized it when I was talking to my little sister, and I was just talking to her about something, and then she was like, "Bree, you do realize I look up to you, right?" And I was just shocked, like, why are you looking up to me? It's not that I'm just like, oh, don't look up to me. It's just I never thought of myself as a role model, so I thought that was just kind of odd. But I think her and I have in common is there has been times in my life that people have asked me questions that they would never dare to ask a man. Just never dare, not one time, ask a man. And throughout her career, she was asked some pretty egregious things that you would think to yourself, I know that you wouldn't ask a man that. I can almost guarantee it, especially when it comes to like childbearing, different belief systems. There's just certain questions that I feel that people feel like they have the right to ask a woman that they would never ask a man. We're not afraid to state our opinion. If it's something that we're really passionate about, we're just gonna just say it, and that's gonna be it. So when we think about things that I disagreed with Sally Ride or in the book, I also want to just put a little pause tangent story in here. This book was written by Sally Ride's friend, and Sally Ride, when she was alive, didn't want a book written by her. And when she was asked if she was gonna write like a memoir about herself, she told people that she didn't know and that she wasn't ready. So I don't think that at the end of the day Sally Ride would have written a memoir about herself. However, in her end of days, because she passed away to pancreatic cancer, she had a partner of 20+ years, and she told her partner, like, you can do whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do is fine. Her partner really wanted the world to know about Sally Ride and to also know about her, because for 20+ years no one knew that Sally Ride was in a relationship with a woman. What I got from the book is that she wanted more validation in her love story, and she wanted people to know that Sally Ride was loved and that she was loved, and that was one of the reasons why this book was created. Into the things that I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. Sally Ride had a saying of, if it's in the past, move forward or laugh. And for me, I would have said, what's in the past is there for a reason. It is up to us to interpret that reason and learn from it, and that it's the difference from learning from something and dwelling on something, and sometimes dwelling on something is not good for your overall mental health. That is kind of the spin I would have put on it. I feel like a lot of times in that time period and in her generation, it's just like, buck up. It's easier said than done. And if you read this whole book, you would know that Sally Ride, from the perspective of people that knew her and the person that wrote this book, really had this outlook of like, I can do anything, right? I can do whatever I want. And you know, that is really good to have, especially as a woman at this time, being like, no, you're not going to close any doors. I'm walking through all of them. And honestly, I love that for her. I love that she was like, look, I'm here. I'm doing what I came to do, and y'all gonna have to deal with that. But I do think in the things that people people have said that she's said, and how the author have described her relationship with Sally Ride, I do think there was a lot of privilege at the forefront of her brain. I think a lot of things that she felt that everybody can do at that time and still to this day can be only afforded to very privileged white women. And I think a lot of times, although it is clear throughout the book that she was a feminist, and this is my second thing that I disagreed with, I don't think her feminism was intersectional. And that's not me being like, oh, let me rag on Sally Ride. It's not that at all. It's just when she talked about certain things throughout the book, I kept thinking about, okay, so how does this fit for Latina women? How does this fit for trans women? How does this fit for black women? How does this fit for Asian women? How does this fit if the woman is disabled? How does this fit if the woman is a survivor of domestic violence or sexual abuse? Like, I kept thinking to myself of like, I hear you, you are doing, she did good work, I'm not gonna knock her on that, but I feel that first wave of feminism really did some disservices to feminism along the line, because it was a type of feminism that seemed to be only inclusive if you were a white woman. I do think if Sally Ride was alive today, she would have thought about, oh, this needs to be intersectional, and would have worked to make things more intersectional. But at the time, I didn't get much of that in the book, and I'm not saying that she didn't do that, but from what I read, I didn't get that her feminism was intersectional. Another thing I disagreed with, and I don't know if this is something Sally Ride did on purpose or had to do it because she was a woman, is that when she would talk about things that upset her, she was very agreeable in the sense of like, she wouldn't raise her voice, she wouldn't get upset, she would just ask a question to you, and the question would make you feel like you are, you know, put on the spot. But she would ask you a question so that you can think deeper about what you just said and think more reflective about what you just said. And I kept thinking to myself, wow, she really played into like nice politics, I think that's what it's called. And I wondered, what would the conversations have been like if she expressed her discomfort or her anger in an outward manner? Because even her partner often said throughout the book, you never knew how she was feeling. You never knew how she was feeling. But that also plays on to her upbringing, because oftentimes throughout the book, the author referenced Sally Ride's parents, who raised them to not talk about their emotions, to not engage in their emotions. They were not a family who talked about feelings. So that translated into other parts of her life. Oftentimes, specifically in that time, and oftentimes currently in the modern world, women are taught to be seen and not heard, and that if they were to get upset or, you know, fling their arms or yell at someone, then that discredit what they just said. Oh, they're just being emotional. Oh, they're on their period. Oh, this and that. I wonder what would have happened if she was outward with her feelings in meetings and different things like that. It was recorded that Sally Ride only yelled at one meeting that everyone who contributed to this book could recall. And I'm just like, huh, I wonder how it must have felt for her to constantly keep things in. And not saying that she had to be an explosive person or that she had to be like, you know what, I'm about to go off. There was a lot of moment that was said in the book that I thought, oh, I would be visibly pissed. I would be so upset that that happened, and I would let you know that I'm so upset that happened. But maybe that was not something that she was afforded to. Being a woman at that time was rough. Overall, I truly enjoyed reading this memoir, and throughout the memoir, I kept thinking like Sally Ride really cared a lot about other folk, especially children, even though she didn't want any children, or children just never came up. But the way that she cared about kids, and specifically young girls learning science and wanting to be astrophysicists, was just chef kiss. And her going to people and trying to get donors and trying to get people to set things in place to help middle schooler girls learn about science and engage with science was just very admirable. And the work that she's done and the things that she started, it's still happening today. Even projects that she started, they've had grants that are still running today. Well, I thank you, Sally Ride, for all that you've done. So now we're going to talk about my favorite memoir out of all of them, and that is Miles Davis, the autobiography. Let me tell you, this is a complex man, and I'm mad that it took me 2022 to read about his life. Like, of course, everyone knows Miles Davis, right? Just a bad jazz guy, just killing them notes, right? But now that I have read his autobiography, it's just everything. It's just everything, even in its messiness. I loved it. So Miles Davis was born May 26, 1926. So he's the oldest one of the group. And he had a full life. Like, Miles Davis was born to two parents. His dad was a doctor, and he didn't have a good relationship with his mom, something that he talked about constantly throughout the book. He respected his mother and he loved her. He had a sister. They would have a lot of like sister and brother rivalry, but his dad was a really supportive father and would help him in any way until his passing. Miles Davis has really been a part of some wonderful bands, have really worked with some awesome people, have followed a lot of people's careers while also trying to make a name for himself. And he contributed to the blues in ways that are still felt today. There was one part in the autobiography where I was like, I wish this would have happened. And there was a part where Miles Davis and Jimi Hendrix were going to get together and do an album, and that never happened because Jimi died in Paris. I think he choked on his own throw up or something like that. And I was just like, man, that's really unfortunate for Jimi. And that's also, it's just really sad that that happened and we didn't get a chance to get that music, but also really sad that he died that way. Like, imagine. I wouldn't want to go out that way, let me tell you that. Also, I really enjoyed how Miles Davis talked about Prince. Like, he just really enjoyed Prince, and I was just so happy for him in that moment. Also, he married Cicely Tyson, which is something I did not know at all, and the way he talked about her was something that I didn't know at all too. So now I'm interested to read her memoir that came out a couple years ago, and I've wanted to read that anyway, but now I want to read it and see if Miles Davis was even mentioned, because the way that he described her is not in my mind how I view Cicely Tyson to this day. And I was just sad of like what happened to him when he left his parents' home and went to New York. He started in this new band, and in this new band I think there was a guy named Bird. Yeah, his name is Bird. I just re-googled to make sure I was saying his name right. And Miles Davis and Bird was really good friends, and Bird got addicted to heroin, and he was just out there really engaging in the drug. And unfortunately, you know, life happened to him and he struggled a lot because of his addiction. And around that time, Miles Davis said that a lot of musicians were doing drugs because they were told that it would change their sound or help them with their music or be the best musician that they can. So Miles started to, you know, dibble dabble, and then he started to be full-blown addicted to the drugs that he was using, and that lasted for a couple years. And in those years he met Cicely Tyson and she tried to help him. It was a whole thing. Definitely read the book to figure out all of that. And then his father tried to help him as well, and then he did get clean, but then he was still dibbling dabbling, and then he continued to do so in similar patterns until he got older, and then he stopped cold turkey and didn't do drugs again. But the periods in when he did drugs, it really impacted him. It impacted his marriages to the people he were married to, his children, his music, and how people viewed him. So let's talk about some things that I agreed with the book and with Miles. I agreed in the many ways that he talked about the injustices that Black people experience from police officers or other white people at that time. Miles said a lot of good one-liners to keep you in reflection of the time, how people have treated Black Americans, and the things that Black Americans should continue to do to stand our ground and also be mindful and aware that injustices are happening. Another thing, when I was reading the book, I really enjoyed the stories that Miles Davis told about his father. And one of the things his father told him is to avoid unnecessary bullshit. And that is something that is never going to leave my mind, because now I'm looking at things different. It's just sometimes things come to you in a moment that you need it. And I've said this on my channel and live shows just so many times about how when I turned 30, there was something in my mind that clicked, and I was like, you know what? The amount of blanks I have to give is just dwindling down. So when I read that line of to avoid unnecessary bullshit, I said, well, thank you I needed that sign. Another thing I agreed with Miles Davis is that he said that people viewed him as arrogant, and that he was not arrogant, that he just knew his stuff. And let me tell you, Miles Davis was so freaking intelligent. This man was so smart. He auditioned for Juilliard and got in with flying colors. The way he described music theory and piecing things together and adding different instruments and how he strategically went about creating a band, I was thinking like, what? And that there were people who we are thinking even today, like big musicians, who didn't know how to read music, who had no idea how to use like technical things and make their music better. And this man was out here teaching folks, just out here telling folks what's going on. A lot of times that he would jam out with Jimi Hendrix couldn't read any music, and Miles Davis never hold that against him, nor should we. Right? People learn differently. Just like Miles Davis said, Jimi Hendrix was a natural musician, a talented musician. Miles Davis was the one teaching him that. So for me, I'm like, this man was out here educating everybody. Another thing that I agreed with is that multiple times throughout the book, Miles Davis was targeted by white folks constantly, and especially by white folks in police officer wardrobe. And reading those stories was really hurtful. I just felt a huge amount of discomfort while reading those, because those things are still happening to black men today. Every time, or almost every time something happened, Miles Davis will go into a story and describe what he called white people shit. And as a black woman who has experienced similar experiences, or have witnessed similar experiences that Miles Davis has been through, I have never felt so seen. Another part I agreed with is that, like I said earlier, of him teaching other musicians things that he learned, things that he learned specifically from Juilliard, that he didn't really like Juilliard, is that he was not gatekeeping. He was sharing. Like, he kept saying, you know, I'm going to school, these white folks are teaching me this, and I'm going back and tell everybody in the hood who are musicians and don't have access to this what they're teaching me, because we're all gonna eat. Everybody's gonna eat, and it's gonna be all right. And I was like, look, I love that. I love that this man went to class, got what they were saying, and went right back and told his friends how to use it and become better musicians. Honey, yes, love to see that. Another thing I found was he talked about how intuitive he is and how it would scare other people and scare himself. So he said one time he went somewhere and this man came up to him and he was like, hey man, do you know where I'm going after this? And Miles Davis replied, New Orleans. And he was like, oh my god, how did you know I was going to New Orleans? He was just talking about how intuitive and how he knew things. And a lot of times I have friends who will call me and tell me stuff, and I almost always guess what they're about to tell me, especially if they're pregnant. It's like something in me knows that they're pregnant, and I don't know what that's about. And it's the same with my sister. Like, if my sister calls me, I can know by the call or just a feeling. I'll call her and be like, you know, in my spirit I feel like something's going on with you. Oh no. And then 2 days later it was, let me tell you what happened. There's just something about it, you know. I just know things, or I'll go somewhere and I'll be like, oh, this is what that is, or I'll see something before it happens. I don't know what it is. It's just one of those things I can't explain, and Miles Davis can't explain it either. But the way he explained it, I understood, because he was like, yeah, I don't even know how to explain it. And I was like, same. It's just one of those things that happen. So let's talk about some things that I disagreed with. I disagreed with the moments in which Miles Davis was being homophobic, and it happened several times in the book. I don't want to say not too many, because more than once is too many, but it happened a couple times in the book, and I was like, huh. He just like made statements that I was like, but again, like with everything, I have to tell myself, you know, this was a time of when things happened. And the same thing, like I said, with Sally Ride. I feel like if Sally Ride was still alive and still learning about the world right now and how things have changed, I think things would have changed. And I also think things would have changed for Miles Davis, because he was constantly evolving. He was a firm believer of changing and going with the time. He constantly believed that, even when electric instrument was introduced at a time where he was creating bands and people were like, oh no, electric instruments is gonna really ruin a band and blah blah blah, and Miles was like, look, the times is changing and it is what it is. And the way he talked about certain musicians and things that he said, you can tell that he was changing throughout the autobiography, like in his his younger years, he really said some things that I was just like, no, I'm not okay with that. Another thing I disagreed that he did was that, you know, there were moments in his relationship with the women that he married or women that he was with that he hit them. And I just don't think partners should be hitting their other partners. Like, if you feel that you have to hit your partner, that's something you need to unpack. You need to unpack that with a friend. You need to unpack that with your therapist. You need to figure out a way to let that go, because that cannot be it. I also disagreed with his like strong rules he had for his band, specifically when he would say no women can come on his band, meaning the partners of the people who was in his band, the men that was in his band. And I kept thinking to myself, sir, you out here with all these women you're bringing, what's going on here? And then there was a story that was in the book that made him change that rule, but I just thought that rule was so unfair to the other bandmates. And again, that's not something that I would do. So I also want to, you know, reinstate that everything that I'm saying I disagree with is just stuff that I just wouldn't do or wouldn't say, and I just found, what? You know, like, how, why? Another thing is, towards the end of the book, he kept saying certain things about black women, like black American women, in a hotep manner, and I was like, sir, what? In one of the lines he was saying like black American women don't know how to take care of their men like black women from Africa, and I was like, that is a lot to unpack. I'm not gonna unpack that in mixed company on this video, but that is, what? Like, okay. All right. I hope y'all know this laugh is like, ha, 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 ha. Not a real, you know, chuckle through the gut laugh. He was out here exploiting a lot of women to keep up with his habit, and he even said that he didn't like that he did that, and that he was not him when he was on drugs. Like, that was a different Miles, that wasn't who he was. And I appreciate that, because he also lent that grace to other musicians at the time who was doing things that was completely out of their character when they were high. And I'm gonna end me talking about Miles Davis to leave y'all with something that he said that just felt really seen by, and I think it's worth repeating. He said, I hate it when white people try to get credit for something. Like, just because they found out about it mean it wasn't happening. Then they try to get everybody, especially black people, kicked out of it, and when you speak about it, you become a black radical. So now in this next session of this long video, thank you for rocking with me, is that I'm going to talk about why I chose them. So I chose Sally Ride because I knew that her and I have the same birthday and I wanted to learn more about her. I chose Lauryn Hill because of what she meant to me at the time. I did look on this list of like everybody who's born on the same day as me. Sorry about that, Arthur, sorry. So looking at this list, I was looking at people who either impacted me or I had some similarity to, and to me, I always felt like Lauryn Hill understood the assignment of the black natural bougie girl, if that makes sense. So I wanted to read about her and learn more about her, and I hope that one day that she writes a book about herself, because I think that would be invaluable to the literature community. And I chose Miles Davis because of the blues. Really, I grew up listening to the blues. I grew up listening to jazz. I grew up listening to a lot of people from his time era. A lot of it is because I'm from New Orleans, and I just felt like I would connect with him while reading the book. I was very surprised on how I had more similarities with him than other folks that I was reading for this video. So that was a big surprise to me, and Miles Davis' autobiography was probably the only autobiography I ever read that I never wanted to end. I was listening to that thing at like 1.2 speed. I was like, I don't want it to go away. Let me just suck all of this in, because it was good, even in this messiness. And I know that there was a lot of people who didn't like the book because he cursed a lot. Like, MFer was his favorite curse word. Do you understand me? But it's my mom's favorite curse word too. So at the end of the day, I wasn't feeling attacked. I was here for it. I felt like it was family. And one of the things that I took from all of them, and that I think me and them also share, is like this drive to really dive into things that we are passionate about, and to give it our all, and to create our own lane, whatever that looks like to each and every one of them. Because I think for me, it's really important that that I do things my own way. And I think that my family understands that, even though I appreciate your input. I appreciate your input into things that involving me, but I feel like I have to be the one to do what I want to do. And if I fail, your girl fail. I get up and I try again. And even though that try again may look different, or my path may look different than someone else in my family, it's just really important for me to have my own voice, to have autonomy, because there's been so many times in my life where I felt like I didn't have autonomy. So it's very important for me to have that. Even with Miles Davis, like, he had very strict rules by his parents and what he could and could not do. So when he left and went to New York and studied at Juilliard, he started to do things he wanted to do. Like, it was very important for him to play his music or let people hear his music in a certain way. And the same thing for Sally Ride. It was very important for her to do her job in a good way and in a logical way, even though her parents did tell her, like, hey, you can do whatever you want to do, live your best life. It was important for her to set that path that she set for herself. And the same thing with Lauryn Hill. It was important for her to express her music in a way that she did. And even though people talked about when Lauryn Hill would go on tour, the songs that everyone loved that was recorded, she would sing them a little bit different. But I believe that, you know, she was trying different things probably, and maybe it didn't like hit like other people wanted it to hit, but that was important to her. So what I've learned is that you got to do what's important to you, and I hope to move through my whole life knowing that I have to do what's important to me. And thank you so much for watching this video. I appreciate you listening to me talking about it. Don't forget, if you need any links of how to support my channel, they are down below. I also have my wish list down below. I know people were asking me about that online, and I definitely appreciate that so much. And I appreciate y'all watching this video because I didn't know it was gonna be this long. Have a wonderful day. We'll talk soon. Bye.